An ironic, or maybe not, development for this tax filing deadline day. Saskatchewan is facing a CRA audit as the federal government looks to recoup carbon tax funds the province is withholding for home heating. Saskatchewan's response: they consider the province's bills paid in full. Joining us now is Saskatchewan's Premier Scott Moe. Premier Moe, thank you so much for making the time. I appreciate it. Good to see you.
Well, thank you, Vassy.
If, in fact, your province has, as you would characterize it, paid your bill in full, why is the CRA auditing you?
Well, I think the CRA does frequent audits, whether it be in provincially owned crown corporations, or whether it be, on businesses or even persons at time across Canada. I suspect they're auditing us at this point in time, maybe even at the direction, I don't know, of the federal government, due to the discrepancy that the federal government has with us mirroring their decision in removing the carbon tax from the ways that we heat our home in Saskatchewan, like the federal government has done for Atlantic Canadians.
I guess help me understand the logic, because I understand the political argument that you're making about what they decided to do when it comes to home heating. But I got my income tax return. I probably shouldn't say it publicly, I owe $1,000. I also don't really want to pay it, but I don't have a choice, because if I didn't, I would be breaking the law. Why isn't that a consideration for your government?
Well, as far as the audit goes, that's a question best posed for the CRA or the federal government as to why they might be auditing the provincial government. But what we have said is all along is we've mirrored this decision that the federal government made, a decision they made at the request of a number of Atlantic Canadian MPs of theirs. We mirrored it to extend to the ways that we heat our homes, and we've asked the federal government. We would reiterate our ask is, let's make the policy decision that you made fair for all Canadians. Let's remove the carbon tax from whatever heating fuel we might use to heat our homes wherever we might live. That seems like the fair and the logical decision for the federal government to make. And I would say this isn't a partisan decision in any way. We had unanimous votes for our position in the Saskatchewan legislature, which I would suspect means that we are representing Saskatchewan residents largely with the decision that we have made to mirror the federal government's policy decision in this space. And even across Canada, we see Liberal premiers and Liberal MPs asking the Prime Minister to remove the carbon tax from heating fuel, whether it be heating fuel or other sources as well. So we don't view it as a partisan decision. We view it as a decision that's based in fairness.
But one of the salient parts of what you just pointed out was that all these other premiers, all these other Canadians are asking the federal government for an exception on their behalf. You're not asking the federal government, Premier, with all due respect. You've just unilaterally decided that you will break the law in order to provide that exception to the residents of your province. Why couldn't you pursue a discussion with the federal government or an appeal of the same nature as other premiers, instead of creating an example for people in your province that it's okay to break the law if you don't like it?
We're having that discussion, and I'm not so sure that we are breaking the law. If you dig into the budget, the pieces of budget legislation that the federal government is looking at introducing in their Budget Implementation Act, which isn't even introduced in the House yet, but if you look under Annex 3, there are changes that the federal government is going to make to their Carbon Tax Act, or the Greenhouse Gas Pollution Pricing Act that they have. We suspect so that their CRA and that legislation will have to be passed, and passed quite likely retroactively, so that the CRA can do what they think they are going to do. And so we don't think we are breaking the law at this point in time, due to that piece of legislation, that Budget Implementation Act legislation that will have to be passed. We feel we've paid our taxes in full in Saskatchewan. Certainly we've paid the same amount of tax on how we heat our homes in Saskatchewan as those residents of Atlantic Canada have.
If the CRA determines, Premier, that your government, that your province is in arrears, does owe it money for taxes that have not been remitted, will you comply with the decision from the CRA?
So listen, we're a long ways from a decision in this. We'll respond to the CRA. Our position is that our taxes are paid in full. We understand the CRA is there to, at times, work with individuals or businesses across Canada. Working with a provincial government or a provincially owned Crown corporation, I think, is something that is quite different for the CRA due to an unfair policy that was introduced by the federal government, a policy that is not partisan in its nature, just purely unfair. We have Liberal premiers that have called out this policy. We have in our province all parties, including independents, that have voted for the Saskatchewan piece of legislation that is ensuring that Saskatchewan families are going to pay exactly the same amount of carbon tax on how we heat our homes as Atlantic Canadian families. And we just reiterate our ask to the federal government is to do the right thing. The vast majority of Canadians, I think, are asking you to do just that, and that's to treat Canadian families fairly, extend the decision you made around not paying the carbon tax on home heating fuel to all Canadians. It would hinder you from having to retroactively change legislation so that you may actually be able to enforce what you can't enforce today. So we don't feel we're breaking the law, and we also feel that our taxes most certainly are paid in full today.
Just very quickly, though, if the CRA, again, Premier, does decide that is not the case, you're unwilling today to say that you will comply with what the Canada Revenue Agency determines?
We believe it is the case. We have remitted the taxes that are owed to the federal government on all fronts, whether it be the carbon tax or any other taxes that are owing. And so we believe we are in good standing with respect to what is owed by the government of Saskatchewan or our Crown corporations, and we stand by that. So we'll respond to the CRA's request and any requests that they might have. And but the fact of the matter is we feel we're paid in full. The federal government is looking at retroactively changing legislation. Is quite simply there's a better solution, and that's for the federal government to treat all Canadian families fairly. And to date, they've chosen specifically not to do that.
Premier, I'm going to leave it on that note. I appreciate you making the time for our program as always. Thank you.